Hello and welcome to the Stong and Calumet Drawing Essentials mini-series. In this video series, you'll get to learn about the basic elements of art in order to better your understanding and your ability. Every video goes over an exercise and then has a challenge, which on Fridays we will stream and work on together. So usually, when we think of art, we just think of it as something to look at, to engage with visually. But artists try to engage more senses than just sight, and using texture is a great way to engage touch. Even when you're not supposed to touch a drawing or a painting, it can appear like it has texture. So, what is texture? Texture is the look or form of a surface. It can be real or implied, like so many other elements of art that we've gone through. So when we talk about actual or real texture, that's the texture you can feel, like that on a rough bronze sculpture, or even a raised painting. Then there's implied texture. So implied texture is just a visual element that cannot be felt. It's like if you touch a drawing, you'll only feel the paper, but you'll see texture. This painting that we did in one of Stong and Calumet's speed painting sessions, which will happen again once we're meeting in person, is a great example of implied texture, because you see that the trees have texture, but you can't actually feel any of the texture on the trees. You just see it. So different types of lines and shapes can create different types of textures. And when we're talking about lines or shape rather than form, because those are two-dimensional, we're talking about implied texture. So with line, think of the difference of the lines in someone's hair versus the lines on a concrete. Look at your own hair. What does that look like? Versus just some lines on your baseboards maybe at your house. Then there's also shape. So shape can also imply texture. When we're talking about shape, think of maybe something like a honeycomb. We see all those individual octagons, and they imply texture. One of the major things that does contribute to a sense of texture is actually pattern. So the repetition of shape and or line is ultimately what creates the appearance of texture. So that means repeating the same or similar shapes or lines over and over then creates these patterns of variation. So you'll see here in this painting by Klimt that he uses various shapes that are repeating, and then it creates almost the sense of feeling, and it looks like you can touch the painting, even though it's just a painting. And that is due to the use of repetition and pattern to create this implied texture. Even when we're thinking of the previous paintings we were looking at, like the hair one, you'll see that the hair strands being repeated over and over again in a pattern is what created the look of hair. It wasn't just a block of brown, it was those repeated lines. So we're going to begin our first exercise, and that is a hairy fruit. Yes, that does sound funny. For this, you're going to want to grab a fruit or a vegetable. I suggest an apple, onion, or pear, but you could use anything, even if you don't have vegetables or fruits. Use a can, it'll work the same. And then just draw it. Just a really basic line drawing. So you'll see here, this is my apple. There's not much to it. It's just kind of that irregular shape. And then I added in the crevice and the stem. And that's how I began. Once you have your outline done, you're going to want to decide which direction your fur or hair will go in. So I tried to make mine follow the contours of the apple. So you'll see that I actually draw in these little contour lines once I finish deciding how thick I want my outline to be. So the contour lines follow the shape of the apple, and then my hair will follow those contour lines. So when you're drawing the hair, decide if you want it to be short or long. I suggest drawing long or short hair. It's a lot easier to work with. And you're just going to want to do lots of little hairs, little strokes that resemble hair that go in one direction. When you begin, it won't really look like much. It'll just look like a scribbled on fruit or vegetable or can, whatever you might have. But as you continue to add and to repeat and to just keep on repeating this little pattern, you'll notice that it actually starts to look like a furry apple, onion, banana, pear, can, Coke bottle. I don't know what you have, but whatever it is that you're doing, it'll start to resemble that. So it's actually really cool, really fun. You'll see that I began to clump my fur together a bit. I don't know if you have a pet or an animal, but sometimes in the spaces where fur bits meet up, it tends to clump up a little. I think like right under their legs is a good example of that. I also decided to make my fur darker, where you can see the shadows on my apple. So in my apple, you can see shadows on the inside and right near the bottom. So my fur is a bit darker there, and to do that, I just drew it close together. And I also did a little shadow. The shadow's just cross-hatching, which if you didn't watch our line or value videos, cross-hatching is just layered lines. And there is my hairy fruit. You'll see that the hair follows the direction of the apple. For our next exercise, I'm going to show you how to draw 3 textures and you're going to draw one of your own. So what you want to do is begin by drawing boxes or some other space that you can then draw in. I use this little playing card because I recently moved and I don't really have much in the way of things to trace, but really anything will work. What we're going to do is wood, cracked earth, and fur. So to begin with, for wood, you're going to want to draw a couple of shapes that look like teardrops almost. They're long, kind of skinny, and a little irregular. I draw a few more than I did. I only did 4. I'd probably draw close to 6 or 7. You then want to outline those teardrops, a little squiggly. You don't need it to be a perfect circle or a perfect teardrop. And then from there, you're going to begin drawing vertical, curved lines. These lines should not intersect your teardrops. Instead, they should kind of skirt around them and continue the shape. You can see here that I added in a few more teardrops because I really did not draw enough. And that's one of the great things about drawing. If you don't do enough, you can always add on more. If you do too much, you can erase it. Don't worry, you're okay. So then, the center of your teardrops, you're going to want to fill in with black, and then it almost looks like wood grain, like you'd see on a desk or a cabinet. So next up is cracked earth. So first you want to lightly draw in this sort of grid-like pattern. You'll see that it's kind of a grid, but it's like curved lines. Then, pressing darker, or pressing harder so that your lead comes out darker, you're going to fill in these shapes that you create with the grid in almost like a rock-like appearance. So it should be a little bit squiggly. It should be varying in size. And it's okay if it doesn't take up all of the space and there's a bit of a gap between it, because what we're doing is that really dry earth that you see sometimes when you're hiking, and there's usually lots of cracks in that. So this actually takes such a long time to do. This is one of the most complex textures that I'm showing you. My hand hurt a little bit when I was doing it, and I draw a lot, so take your time, be nice to yourself, don't worry. You'll see here that I'm almost done it, but it still doesn't really look like earth, it just looks like irregular shapes. So what you're going to do to really add the texture is then almost shade it in, so we're adding value to it. And in order to do that, what we're doing is just very lightly hatching around the edges so that there's a bit of a darkness surrounding it, and that gives it almost a rocky texture in that it makes it appear like it is earth that is being used. This is a little time consuming, but trust me when I say that it's worth it and that it will turn out well. So you're adding the sense of value to your drawing, and you just keep on adding it. You want to add it to all of them. You'll notice that some of your tiny rocks might end up looking completely covered in these hatching lines. That's okay. That's how it should look. That's how it does look in real life as well. So don't worry about that. You'll also see that the edges between my earth pieces are really, really dark. That's because I filled them in a bit, so that way it's more obviously distinct pieces. After you do all your hatching, something that you might want to do is just near the center of big pieces, scribble in a little bit more so that it looks like there's some more light reflecting off of it, almost like there's a divot in the ground. Alternatively, you can add in cracks that are going from the cracked part of the earth. And then it creates this cool cracked earth texture. So the third texture I'm showing you is fur. For this one I decided that I wanted a circle or a sphere shape to show you on. So to draw a circle, all that you need to do is draw a T and then draw the rounded parts around it. So first I just did my contour lines to decide which direction the fur will go in and where it comes from. Then my fur, really, it begins to look like scales. So you draw the top ones first, and you just draw these little triangles underneath it, or triangle-like shapes. They're kind of teardroppy again, actually. Lots of teardrops going on tonight. I hope you're all happy and in a good mood, because I sure am. So you're drawing these little teardroppy shapes, and they're going in the direction of the sphere. They're following the direction. And this should be the case no matter what you're drawing. Even if you're drawing an animal, you'll see that the fur on their neck goes in a different direction than the fur on their belly, than the fur on their legs. So after you draw that, you're going to want to fill in individual segments of fur with thin lines like we did with the hair when we were drawing our hairy fruit or vegetable or can or whatever you happen to draw. You just keep on repeating that. Then you get something that looks like pieces of fur that are coming together. So this would be almost like a semi-long fur. So this is what it looks like when you're all done. You'll notice there's a blank section. That's because I want you to come up with your own texture to add in there. It can look like anything, because all that texture really is pattern.